The Supreme Court of Canada has agreed to hear the appeal of a case related to Newfoundland and Labrador's decision to close its borders early on in the pandemic. The case was launched by Kim Taylor, who was barred to travel home in 2020 to attend her mother's funeral. Her lawyers argue the rules violated her charter right to travel freely across the country. The province argues the pandemic was reason enough to overrule that right. I'm joined now by somebody right in the thick of this. Lawyer Paul Pape is representing the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, which is the second applicant in this case. Paul, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Good evening.
So how are you feeling about the fact that the Supreme Court has decided that it will hear this appeal?
I'm pretty excited. You don't get up there very often. I've been doing this for years, and it's a rare chestnut to pick up off the ground, and this is a fabulous case. So I'm excited, as my partner is, and as the Civil Liberty Association is.
I mean, the Newfoundland and Labrador Court of Appeal declined to hear the first appeal. That was back in 2023. So why do you think the Supreme Court has decided to pick this up now?
Well, for good reasons. I mean, this is there are a couple of issues. The first issue is, do Canadians have the right to travel from province to province freely? And you would have thought that this was an issue that was already put to bed, but it's not. It's still a jump ball. And these sorts of cases where a resident of one province is barred from going to another province don't come up very often. And in the context of the pandemic and controlling the virus, it's an important issue. The second point of it was, how do you deal with it? Do you just say you can't come in and that's the end of it? Or do you have middle roads, such as 14 days isolation before you can get in? And so it went to the Newfoundland Court of Appeal, and they said it's moot, which means by the time we got there, the virus was gone, and the regulations that the chief medical officer of health had passed had vanished. So they were able to say, why bother us? And the answer is pretty easy, isn't it? This is going to happen again. Maybe not this week, maybe not this month, but everybody knows it's going to happen again. So these issues need to be dealt with. And we never get reasons on leave applications, but the Supreme Court, I like to say in its infinite wisdom, decided this was a case they were going to look at rights of travel across the country and how to respond in circumstances where you might restrict the right to travel.
Paul, let me ask you, given that we are, as that earlier court decision had sort of indicated, kind of beyond the pandemic, do you think, does that change the climate in which the Supreme Court will be looking at this and making that decision?
That's a really good question. I don't think so. I think so. Their job is to look prospectively. How can they set the stage, set the table for the next time this happens? And I think that's how they're going to look at it. So the fact that the COVID pandemic has passed, I think, is more academic than practical.
And let me ask you, what does winning look like in this?
Well, in my world, winning is getting leave. The fact that I'm going to be there is a win. Anything after that is a bonus. You know, the issue of whether there's a right to travel from province to province is unclear. The Civil Liberties Association says citizens and permanent residents have the right. The judge said only citizens, not permanent residents. And the province of Newfoundland and Labrador said, none of you have the right. So what's a win? I think the fact that they're going to look at it is a win. Where you go from there in terms of how the court looks at the restrictions and saying you probably should have limited the entrance to 14 days isolation as opposed to barring them from coming in. You know, whatever they do on this, it's going to be right. I've got a lot of confidence in them getting right, and so as long as it's right, it's a win.
You know, Paul, I probably don't have time for a long answer on this one, but there's going to be a lot of people who are watching this who feel their rights were infringed upon during the COVID pandemic. We know this to be true, and they'll be watching your case very closely as it goes to the Supreme Court. How should they read into the fact that it's gone to this high? Do you hear from them, and do you feel like this gives perhaps them some to reason believe that they're being heard?
Well, everybody has a right, has access to courts in this country. And if they're not happy, they hire a lawyer or they act on their own and they seek access to the courts. There's nothing magical about that. My job is to deal with the issues that I've been retained for. If they have other issues, hey, good luck to them. They're litigating them now. But they should watch to see how the court decides how the province, the chief medical officer of health, who declared the emergency, how he should respond in these circumstances. So maybe they take some lesson from that. But the broader question implicit in what you're saying is, they have lawyers. These people, you've seen them. They have no difficulty expressing their opinion, and they should do it, which is what the country's about.
Paul Pape, thank you so much. Paul Pape is a lawyer involved in the Supreme Court appeal related to Newfoundland and Labrador's decision to close its borders during the pandemic. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for hearing me.